Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your Black Moon Lilith in the second house. In astrology, the second house is ruled by Taurus, and its ruler is Venus. So suffice it to say that Venus is about the finer things in life. The second house is a money house. Taurus is an earth sign, and so our earthly possessions are associated with the second house. And this is also about what you value. So this is not necessarily tangible. This can be, and I heard too that this was the house of self-esteem. So your net worth and your self-worth. And Black Moon Lilith is about shadow issues such as shame. It can deal with secrets, but there's also other interpretations that I have found in on other websites that talk about rebellion, for instance. And of course, the feminine principle is inherent in this as well. And so because of the many years or centuries of women being held down, that kind of rebellious feminine energy. But of course, both men and women have the divine feminine, divine masculine energies that are part of who they are. And so it is not connected to gender, this particular placement. So there is a kind of like a connection, or you could make that connection between Black Moon Lilith and Pluto. They're going to have different elements to them. I think with Pluto, it's more about transformation, and there's more of the theme of power and shame and secrets with, not more, but I think that's more of an emphasis with Black Moon Lilith. So I want to give a shout out to advancedastrology.com, where I am getting some of their insights and kind of riffing off of them. Because a lot of times on these sites, they will give you kind of the buzzwords, but you have to flesh it out. And it's very important to elaborate on these things, because just making a brief statement doesn't really explain something in depth. And so one of the things when you talk about self-worth and the second house is that people with Black Moon Lilith have probably had some kind of trauma in this area. And this particular website talked about bullying when you were young. And I was really kind of confused because, there are certain houses which deal more with childhood issues. But where I think they're going with this is the self-esteem issue. And usually we trace it back to when we were very young. And that's why they probably are doing so. So the reason that this is very, very important when somebody is struggling with low self-esteem due to the behavior of other people is that can inform all the decisions you make. So if you have low self-esteem, even if you haven't gotten healed to the point where you can put that behind yourself, for the most part, because I think that we're all human and we all have vulnerabilities, and I don't think that it's like, oh, I'm perfectly healed and I'm completely confident in myself. But where you are not like this open wound walking around all the time, I think that is enough healing for what I'm referring to. But until you get to that point, simply by understanding that you still have low self-esteem. This is all it takes, because the danger is when people are operating with low self-esteem and they're making choices and they don't understand that those choices are based on low self-esteem. Usually we will see this in particular, we will see this in the area of relationships, where people allow themselves to be treated less than they deserve. So, another thing, because money is connected to this house, you could say that being taken advantage of can be in the form of not getting paid what you're worth, but also if for some reason you happen to make a decent living, that you would allow yourself to be financially exploited in some way. And, but the good side of this is that a person with this placement can be quite interested in building wealth. And they may very well attract it because they have this power behind themselves. So it's really, I think one of the great things about astrology is that it allows you to see your potential. Potential can mean your, projected successes in life and talents and all of these things. And it's not necessarily where you stand right now that you can see that. So the reason that this is so valuable is that sometimes people don't believe in themselves, and all they can focus on is where they're at in the moment. And when they can see that they have potential in a certain area, they're more inspired to go after their dreams, rather than a person who can only see, they can only have lack consciousness because that's all that's right in front of, right under their nose. So, so this can be a very powerful position in a material sense, but I think working with your self-esteem can really expedite the process. So, and also there's a term that Abraham Hicks uses about rockets of desire, which I always think about when I think about my own, desires for the future, is that when you really feel stuck, when you really feel like you want something, but you don't know how you're going to get it, and it seems so far away from attainment, is that you're able to, you're actually shooting off rockets of desire, which means that it's kind of the first act of co-creation. That you're not just sitting there saying, I'll never have this, I'll never have that, but you're actually saying, oh, I really want this, I really want that. Even though that seems kind of futile because you're coming from this place of not having something, it actually, according to Abraham Hicks, is setting that in motion. And they also have a great term too, vibrational escrow, I think that's what they call it, where it's already there. It's like, and it's on the energetic level, but that's the first stage before the physical manifestation. It starts with the immaterial before it travels down to the crystallization in the material. So this is, they mentioned experiencing loss with this Lilith. Now, again, just like I said about the childhood issues, I think of loss in terms of, I'm assuming they mean like emotional loss primarily, and I associate that with the 8th house, which can be a money house too in terms of shared resources, or Scorpio. And because that can be the house of death. Now, regardless, I'm not going I'm just going to trust that, they have a reason for why they say that. But they said that that can make a person possessive because they experience that loss. And that is very true. Now, if the person, let's say the person grew up with a family of origin that didn't have a lot of resources, and maybe you got teased for that. That, to me, is another form of loss because the person is getting this kind of rejection from others based on not having the right material items or the name brands, whatever, those kinds of things. So that what that can do sometimes is make the person covetous, and clinging to material things. And but they were talking about security issues. So to me, that's primarily emotional. But sometimes, like if a child grows up and let's say the father was the primary breadwinner, he loses his job, and then it all goes downhill from there. And they had like a middle class lifestyle, and then they were living in a low income environment. And it was like that sense of material loss that haunts them. Yes. And of course, we can't ignore past life influences as well. Some people are irrational when it comes to their fear of, financial security, where they have no reason to be, like they have more than enough money in the bank, and yet they still have anxiety around the issue of money. If there's nothing to trace it back to in this lifetime, then you can probably assume that it's coming from another lifetime. I think now this is an interesting thing. One thing I wanted to point out is that in terms of relationships, Taurus is known as being possessive. And because Taurus rules the second house of possessions, it's like they look at their partner as yet another possession. So by extension, I guess this could apply, if you have Lilith here, to all of your interactions with people, places, and things where you become very possessive over them. So whether it's your home or, get off of my lawn, this is my property, or whether it's a person, why are you talking to my man, that's not, that's my property. You're not allowed to talk to my property. That kind of thing. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to say that this position dehumanizes people, but just looking, just being possessive in that way. Well, that is a form of insecurity if somebody's possessive. So when you trace back these things, you can see that, yes, fear of loss is at the is at the core of why people are like that. The other thing too is values. And they talk about, valuing like integrity and being authentic. And certainly, yes, this is an earth house. So being down to earth, not putting on airs. These kinds of things can be quite rebellious if we look at Lilith in terms of rebellion, in the sense that in certain environments, being authentic is frowned upon. And it's very interesting because I don't have this placement, but I often have seen people who act very fake in social situations, and I'm always trying to be as authentic as possible to counter that. It's almost like a rebellious impulse, if you will, or tendency. So I can understand how that would actually play out. Oh, one thing that I don't know if this is true, because they mention that people who have Lilith in the second house are very sensual. They mention that they are quite sensual. And sensuality is immediately connected to sexuality. And that is just one facet of it. It's really, there are 5 senses: hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, and feeling. And so, like with feeling, if you like certain, fabrics on your skin. I have Taurus rising, so I can talk about this all day about just like, if you like certain scents, if you like the way certain things look, certain colors that really grab you, this is probably true for you. And the thing is that we live in the material world. We're not in an immaterial dimension, like a spiritual dimension. We're in the material world. And this can be a spiritual dimension in its own right because we carry that part of ourselves with us at all times. But this is rebellious when you think about how a lot of religions view the 5 senses. Like, oh, that's terrible. You got to reject those things. That's very self-indulgent. And so I think that a lot of the excesses that we see are direct rebellion or reaction to being deprived of those things. Deprivation creates extremes, and that's why it's so bad to do that or to experience that, because it's hard to be balanced in those cases. So that could be like flying in the face of, if you are a very sensual person, that could fly in the face of your religious teachings or the kind of environment that you were raised. If you were raised in a very Spartan environment that was like, no, you're not, you shouldn't be too self-indulgent. How many people deprive themselves of pleasure? But suffice it to say, just like Pluto can deal in extremes, so can Black Moon Lilith. So there might be some of you who are doing exactly that, that you are afraid of pleasure, you're afraid of spending money, and so you're being very economical, you may call it, but actually you are being self-denying. Now that I think about this, I really connect this to the second chakra in a lot of ways. The second, well, I mean, it's not totally, but there are some elements of it. The first chakra, and actually the first chakra can play into this too, is the chakra of security, having enough to survive. It's the level of survival. And some people, regardless of the dollar amount in their bank account, are still living basically on that first chakra. The second chakra is a chakra of pleasure. And it deals with creativity, also reproductive. I think it's connected to the reproductive organs, so sexuality would fall into this area. But all kinds of pleasure, joy, because once you transcend the need for basic survival, then you get into this like, okay, now I want to enjoy. But on the flip side of things, hedonistic behavior, and that's what they mentioned here, can be connected to this house. And I think that this was the site that I found this. I don't see it now. And it was funny because they said something like, there's nothing wrong with hedonism. And I was thinking, are you kidding me? The whole idea of hedonism is Yeah, it must not have been this site. It must have been another site that I saw. Hedonism is excessive quest for pleasure. But, oh yeah, this was a site. I thought it was. I'll just read exactly what they said. They go, Lilith in second house suggests a hedonist. This on its own is not bad, but it often indicates a tendency to be self-indulgent, overeat, overspend, etc., etc. It is hard for you to stop. When under pressure, you can get lost in soothing yourself. And this, when they said this on its own is not bad, no, a hedonist is somebody who kind of revels in self-indulgence. And it's like that becomes their religion, if you will. Oh my God, do you hear those flight patterns? Do you hear those flight patterns? Patterns? The plane going by every minute? Oh, they do that sometimes to kind of, so that other people, it relieves other people. But then I have to pause every 10 seconds almost, sometimes. Another thing that they mention are body issues, which is very interesting because the same thing can sometimes happen like with Chiron in the first house. And I do feel that, and also Chiron in Taurus, and I feel that, because this is the domain of Taurus, that's what they're referring to with the idea of beauty, the ideal, I should say, of beauty, the beauty ideal. And that being one of the values, the things that you value. Now, in terms of this, if somebody pursues this obsessively, that can lead to all kinds of problems. The person who's constantly getting plastic surgery or some kind of work done, and they end up destroying their beauty or doing something which radically transforms them, but not necessarily in the way that they had thought it would. And we have to look at too, what are your values? Are your values so much on the surface? Again, as I stated earlier, self-esteem that is not healed to some degree can manifest in the desire to change the outer, thinking that it will change the inner. People who have lost dramatic amounts of weight and who experienced maybe prejudice or ridicule because they were, morbidly obese or whatever you want to call it, when they lose that weight, there's often a psychological, it's like an ego death of sorts. I don't know if that's the proper term, but they realize that there's more to it than that, that their mind still has not caught up with whatever image they had because of how much they weighed. And this is an important lesson to learn because people who think that they can fix themselves, even with something like that, that's actually going to benefit them physically, and they'll feel so much better in terms of how they move and things like that, it cannot necessarily fix their mindset. And that has to be integrated, or their mind has to catch up with their physical form. And so the same thing applies to any other type of physical transformation. If the person feels that if only I look like this or that, then I would be just like so accepted. And they might have to find out the hard way that having breast implants may attract somebody, but it's not necessarily a good relationship. And it might not even be a relationship. It might just, make you seem more sexual, not necessarily make somebody want to form a relationship with you. And if you have low self-esteem and, big fake boobies, it's not going to cut it. So sometimes that's an important lesson. Sometimes you have to go through that to gain the wisdom. But if the person actually is working on themselves spiritually, or, if they're actually going through therapy, whatever it is that they need to do, or a combination thereof to heal, they may not have to take it to that level. That might be something that had crossed their mind, but they didn't actually go through with it. So that's one of the pitfalls, or the things to kind of really examine, is how much you feel like your body is dictating the quality of your life, or your appearance, I should say. And really question that, because the person could find out the hard way that that was just an excuse that the person used to explain away why they were not happy, but they realized that happiness is an inside job, eventually. But it doesn't have to be that way. A person can realize that sooner rather than later. Okay, let's see if there's anything else that I wanted to talk about. Okay. Well, specifically about sex. I'm sure that there are some people with this position that are inhibited in this way because of the extreme polarities that might occur. But for the people who are sensual, or they might say that they are sexual, and they are in your face about it, yeah, I mean, that could certainly. They're not on this site. They're not really characterizing it in that way. But I would say, especially with women, this is an issue, because traditionally women have been shamed for enjoying sex. Sex is supposed to be for procreation, and the woman is the one who carries the baby. So she, in a sense, carries the end result of the sexual encounter. But like Pluto, sex and money can get mixed up. And so you can have women, again, I mean, the second house can be, how you earn your money. So this could be sex work. And there is a huge, huge stigma on sex work. Stigma, I mean, it's illegal in many instances in different countries or different municipalities. It's illegal. So talk about the other, the moral stigma, that there's like a legal prohibition against it. It's interesting. They didn't talk about sex work here, but I do know that sometimes a planet now of course, Black Moon Lilith is not, it's a point, I think it's an imaginary point, but I mean, with the actual planets, they say that if you have a planet there, that whatever that planet is, it can indicate the type of work that you're doing. So I have no reason to believe that wouldn't be true here as well. So again, money can be seen as a way to gain power. And is that true? Is that ultimately true? There has to be a balanced approach, or else a person can make money their God. And that, since the second house is a house of values, the person may violate their values in order to have that financial gain. Prostitution doesn't have to be immoral if people are upfront about it. It's just an energy exchange, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you get a massage without a happy ending, that's considered legal. But once that happy ending happens, which is a form of massage too, then it becomes illegal. Where is this coming from? This is just that kind of, morality that is oppressive. And by the way, I just want to make it clear that I'm not saying that sex work is never dangerous, degrading, inappropriate, because it certainly can be. There might be situations that are not healthy psychologically, that are coming from from trauma, or to feed an addiction. All of these things are not necessarily reasons to get involved with that. So I want to make it clear that it's not just completely safe and all of that. But I'm just questioning why it has the stigma that it has, just in general. But it's important for the individual who has this position and may have hedonistic tendencies, and even shopping till you drop, that materialism that is rampant, overly materialistic nature, that you question your relationship with money to make sure that you're not violating your values in terms of how you interact with others to obtain money. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.